Proceed, sir.
Okay, good evening, all of you, and welcome to the second session of POSI Gurukul lecture series. Today, we are very fortunate to have two eminent faculty from Pediatric Orthopedic Society of India as our Sadgurus. First is Dr. Matthew Varghese from St. Stephen's Hospital in New Delhi, and next is Dr. Alaric Arujis from Wadia Children's Hospital in Mumbai. So both of them are known for their contribution to the Pediatric Orthopedic Society of India, and they have done a lot of work pertaining to today's topic of discussion, which is clubfoot. Thank you very much, Dr. Matthew Varghese and Dr. Alaric Arujis, for accepting our invitation to be Sadgurus today. And we have Dr. Soumya Paik from Apollo Gleneagles in Kolkata as our guru, who is going to talk to us on relapsed and late presenting clubfoot. So the format is Soumya will give his lecture for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes, we'll have an interactive session involving 5 of the students. So over to you, Soumya. You can start your lecture.
Good evening, Sadgurus, my senior panelists, and my friends. Today, I am going to present a topic on relapse and late presenting clubfoot. I shall try to limit the presentation for the residence level, which is asked frequently in the examination purpose. And this is a confusing topic because there is no consensus. So I shall try to be in the line minimal possible, which will be asked in the examination part. Regarding the clubfoot management, pauncity management, there are a lot of articles in the different textbooks also. So it is very difficult to follow a lot of textbooks. This is a very good guideline in the clubfoot management. The Global Health is easily available online. The clubfoot management is given there in a very short and concise manners. Now let us come to the late presentation and relapsed clubfoot presentation. So relapsed clubfoot, we shall discuss on the 3 different headings. Why does it happen and how to diagnose it and how to manage. Let us discuss one by one. First, I shall discuss why does it happen. In the Ponseti corrections in the final plaster, Dr. Ponseti said that in his initial life, he used to maintain the corrections just to normal foot neutral position. And for that cases, his early life clubfoot cases, there is chance of recurrence. So later he added the 70 degree of abduction, which actually resulted in the proper stretching of the medial structures and less number of recurrences. So that is why the adequate abduction is very important. We can frequently see the plaster like this as a final plaster. Apparently looks fit, looks well, but ultimately there is a chance of recurrence in long run. Second part is a disease pathology itself. Even the Dr. Ponseti said, even as a base possible results, there is a chance of 6% chance of recurrence in spite of good follow-up and good proper corrections. So there is still chance of recurrence even after you do the proper Ponseti. But in the disease pathology like atypical clubfoot and it's a syndromic clubfoot, the disease itself causes chances of increased early recurrence. Third important part is a faulty brace. In the Ponseti protocol, Dr. Ponseti said that both the shoes should be fixed with a bar and foot should be rotated outwards. Parents frequently demand for the single shoe brace for the comfortable child's comfortable zone. But there is a lot of companies also, they also promote that AFO with some abduction strap, but it ultimately does not follow the Ponseti protocol. So AFO is not allowed, which cause early recurrence. So proper Ponseti protocol brace with the two shoes joined with the bar is very much important. Sometimes even if it is a bar is like that, but apparently the angles of corrections might not be proper. In the Ponseti protocol, Dr. Ponseti said that the diseased foot should have a 70 degree of abduction and normal foot should have a 40 degree of abduction. So proper abduction maintenance is also important, which prevents its less relapse. Dr. Matthew Dobbs recently claimed there's a dynamic brace which is give a more comfortable for the child would ultimately might give a good result and less recurrence, but it is yes, debatable and not properly accepted by all. Now, recurrence, another most important part of the Ponseti protocol is the proper follow-up. The follow-up protocol, according to the Dr. Ponseti, that you need to follow up the child for 3.5 to 4 years of age. But in India, what we face commonly, that if the foot is corrected properly, there is a chance of decreased number of visits. That there are a lot of NGOs and organizations which follow them properly. But for the individual surgeons also who are treating the Ponseti protocol, at least we should have a proper database of the patients. If there is some patients stops coming, then it is always advisable to call them up and to encourage for recurrent follow-up to pick up the early recurrence. So that makes the situation easy, and properly treatment give a proper result for the Ponseti protocol. Now, I want to come to is how to diagnose it. The diagnosis means that is a deformity again. There are different protocols, different ways of recurrence. Diagnosis, so it's very important. One type of recurrence is a dynamic deformity, and there is a no fixed deformity. Another part is a fixed deformity. In dynamic supination deformity, when the patient is or the baby is attempted standing or walking, the foot is supinated. Otherwise, if the patient is the baby is the lying position, you cannot see any deformity. There are fixed deformities like a CTB, it can recur, equinus, varus, adduction, and cavus. So it is very important to have a clear look and proper follow-up to check for the recurrence whether happened in any of the deformity or not. We use a Pirani scoring during the Ponseti treatment protocol, but the actual purpose of the Pirani scoring is very important in finding out the recurrence also. Pirani scoring actually helps properly during the Ponseti plaster techniques for the initial cases, whether it is improving or not. That is another important point. And another important point, to follow up the patient whether is recurring again or not. So proper Pirani scoring monitoring during the follow-up protocol is also important. So let us discuss few points of Pirani scoring. I have taken this slide from Dr. Ganjawala, and there are Pirani scoring. There are mainly depends on the midfoot scoring and hindfoot scoring. For the midfoot scoring, there are 3 points in Pirani scoring: is a medial crease, lateral curvature, curvature of the lateral border, or coverage of the head of the talus. For the hindfoot assessment, there are again 3 points: is a posterior crease, ankle dorsiflexion, and empty heel. Score, there are 3 scores. 0 is a good result, completely corrected, or there is no deformity. 0.5 is in between, 1 is a severe result. So this is a qualitative assessment, and so there is a variation from surgeon to surgeon. So it is always better the same surgeon who is treating the plaster or treating the patients, and it is better to follow by the same surgeon so that Pirani score can be properly maintained and monitored. The maximum score is 6, that means full deformity, and minimal score is 0, that is there is no deformity. Now let us come one by one. What does it mean, the medial crease and other 6 points, 5 points totally? If there is a deep medial crease and you cannot see, if you cannot see the base properly, this is maintained as a score 1. If there is a fine crease, 1 or 2 fine creases, it is maintained as a score 0.5. And if there is a no crease, it is called medial crease score 0. Now come to the curvature of the lateral border. This if the curvature is quite proximal, at least the tarsometatarsal joint, is a severe curvature. This is called score 1. If the curvature is little bit distal, is a metatarsophallangea tarsometatarsal joint, and this is called 0.5. If there is a straight lateral border, this is called 0. Now, coverage of the lateral aspect of the head of the talus is a dynamic assessment or the dynamic assessment. You can feel the head of the talus just anteroinferior to the tip of the fibula. If after attempted correction, the head of the talus is completely palpable, this is called score 1. If it is partially palpable, it is 0.5. If it is not palpable, that means head of the talus is completely reduced, which is called 0 score. Now come to the posterior crease point. It is like a medial crease again. If it's a deep posterior crease, you cannot see the base of the crease properly. This is score 1. If there is 1 or 2 fine creases, this is score 0.5. If there is no crease, this is called score 0. Now come to the ankle dorsiflexion. This is again a dynamic checking. If there is a heel is more than, there is a plantiflexed ankle, this is called score 0. If the heel ankle is a neutral or plantigrade, this is 0.5. If it can be dorsiflexed, this is score 0. Now empty heel, it is a quality assessment. Empty heel and is the position of the, actually in normal foot we can easily palpate the tuberosity of the calcaneus. If the tuberosity of the calcaneal palpation is very difficult and is impossible, then it is said, it is pointed as score 1. If the tuberosity palpable, score is score 1. If it is a partly palpable, then it is score 0.5. It is not palpable at all, then it's 1. Now come to the management part of this relapsed clubfoot protocol. For the relapsed clubfoot protocol, the Ponseti is the treatment. Again, we need to start the Ponseti casting, and whatever if the relapse. Now I shall come to the one by one of the different types of relapse. If it is a fixed equinus corrections, fixed equinus deformity of relapse, then again we start with Ponseti corrections, Ponseti plasters. We do prefer 4 to 5 casts or might be less. And if it is not corrected, then we go for surgery. Surgery might be a repeat TL lengthening, or sometimes it might be a open TL lengthening if needed, a posterior ankle capsule release also. Similarly, if it's a fixed heel varus correction deformity, again the Ponseti casting is the choice. We start with the Ponseti casting. If it is corrected properly, then we go for bracing again as per previous protocol. If it's a dynamic supination, again I said previously that dynamic supination is usually a dynamic deformity. There is no fixed deformity when the child is lying down position. When the patient or the baby is attempted standing or walking, there is a supination of the forefoot. Again, for the dynamic supination, we start with the Ponseti only. If after the second relapse, after the second dynamic supination deformity, then we prefer the tibialis anterior tendon transfer surgery, not before 30 months or 2.5 years of age. So ideal time of surgery as per Dr. Ponseti is a 2.5 years of age, because before that the bony ossification does not appear and surgical results usually are not that good probably. So that is why it is standardized that after 30 months and after the second relapse, we go for tibialis anterior transfer for dynamic supination deformity correction. Now we come to the late presenting clubfoot portion. For the late presenting clubfoot portion, for the newborn CTV, there is a fixed protocol that is accepted all over the world, is Ponseti protocol. But it's a late presenting clubfoot, there is no fixed consensus. Lot of surgeons do practice in a different manner, and if you go through the textbooks, there are different textbooks and different protocol. In exam, I think it is better to follow the proper standard textbook and quote the standard textbook, which is a protocol written in the standard textbook. That is how I taken this from Campbell. In the Campbell, it said that if it's the late presenting less than 1 year of age, according to the Campbell, you start with Ponseti. If it is 1 to 5 year age, is a gray zone, because in this time you can do Ponseti again, you can do soft tissue surgery, you can do bony osteotomy. More than 5 years age, usually deformities are fixed and there is a permanent bony deformity, and further osteotomy or salvage procedure required as per the different age wise. There are other ways like Ponseti, always Ponseti, and there is one group in India who Dr. Shah Alam Khan was told that they prefer always Ponseti irrespective of any age for the recurrence of the late presentation clubfoot. There are Joshi's external stabilization or XFIX system present in India. You can use Elizarov also. So there are a lot of armamentarium for managing the late presenting clubfoot. Let us discuss the portion of the soft tissue surgery, because this is one of the important favorite topic for the examiners. And recently, because of Ponseti, we frequently don't do the CTV soft tissue surgery release, but it is the examiners one of the favorite question. So I think I should elaborate in details for this PMHTR or soft tissue surgery portions. Soft tissue surgery or posteromedial soft tissue release is previously it was done in 2 stages. Then it was modified in 1 stage. There are different incisions described for soft tissue surgeries. But I think 2 important incisions we should know for the residents. One is the Cincinnati incision. It is a complete circumferential incision. There are issues in skin complaint and necrosis, etc. So that is why it is not preferred nowadays. what is preferred nowadays is you usually use a Charcot's posteromedial soft tissue release. I think I should elaborate something in detail in the Charcot's posteromedial soft tissue release, because examiners frequently ask what are the structures released in Ponseti, PMST or surgeries. So I shall go in details for this release process. What are the structures released? The incision is a posteromedial incision. It starts with the base of the first metatarsal curving below the medial malleolus and is go up for the up to distal 2/3 of the leg for proper TL lengthening incision. After the skin incision, we go for soft tissue dissection, and I shall come one by one. In the foot portion below, there is a structure called abductor hallucis tendon. Actually, it is the gateway of the foot. If you don't release the muscle, you cannot see the structures behind it. We prefer to release it from the base, from the distal aspect. After releasing the abductor hallucis tendon, there is another structure called plantar fossa, and we release the plantar fossa also. Now, after that, we have a lot. These structures are present in front of you. Most important structures, I think, at this stage is the neurovascular bundle. And frequently, sometimes in CTEV patients, the anterior tibialis and anterior vascular bundles are absent. So if there is any damage of the posterior neurovascular bundles, it might cause problematic foot and might cause severe complications. And so neurovascular bundle isolation and dissection is the now most important step. After the neurovascular bundle dissection, so behind the medial malleolus, there is a Tom, Dick, Harry, that is tibialis posterior, flexor digitorum longus and flexor longus. We release the sheath, or flexor retinaculum sheath, and release the tendon properly. And one important point here is there is a term called knot of Henry. It is the knot tying of flexor digitorum longus and hallucis longus in the encircled region. Actually, this is not a knot, this is a fibrous adhesion between the tendons and on the undersurface of the navicular. So it is important to release the tendons from each other and undersurface of the navicular to release all the tendons. So now we have properly isolated neurovascular bundle. We have tibialis posterior, we have flexor digitorum longus, we have flexor hallucis longus and tender Achilles tendon. After releasing all the tendons, dissecting all the tendons, we do a Z cut of all the 4 tendons, but we don't do, we do the knotting or tying up at the later stage. After cutting the tendons, you will see pictures like this. There's a lot of ligaments here. This is a little bit confusing, and some issues are there to remember, how to remember what are the ligaments, what are the tendons. After the tendons, what are the ligaments and capsules you need to release. So let us have some look over the ligament portion. Recapitulation of the deltoid ligament. We know deltoid ligament has a 2 part. One is the deep part, it's called anterior tibiopatellar part, and there are some superficial part. What are the superficial part of the deltoid ligament? One is the superficial talonavicular tibionavicular part. Second part is a directly come downwards from tibia to calcaneum, which is called tibiocalcaneal ligament part. And third part goes posteriorly, it's a posterior tibiopatellar part. Now, this is the anatomy of deltoid ligament, which should be kept in mind during the release of the ligaments and capsules of PMST surgery. There are few other ligaments which need to be considered. There is a dorsally, this is talonavicular ligament, and the plantar, this is called calcaneonavicular spring ligament. So incision, when you try to, the main purpose after dissecting the tendons and soft tissues is to free the navicular, free the talonavicular joint. For this, the coarse capsule, dorsal capsule and medial capsule is of the talonavicular joints need to be released, and along with the tendon ligament parts. What are the ligaments? You can see you need to dissect the talonavicular ligament, which is the anterior portion of the deltoid ligament, and the calcaneonavicular ligament or spring ligament. Now, when we cut the, sometimes I just forgot, there's after the talonavicular ligament, there is another joint in front. There's a navicular medial cuneiform ligament. If the deformity is still not corrected properly, we need to address the capsule of the navicular medium cuneiform joint also. After dissecting the medial part, we come to the posterior part of the foot. In the posterior part, there are 2 joints. One is the tibiocalcaneal joint, and it is the tibiotalar joint, and next joint is the talocalcaneal joints. Both the joint capsules should be addressed, and the ligaments also should be addressed. But one important point here, because during the correction of the proximal joints, there's a tibiotalar joint. You need to release the tibiotalar talofibular ligament also. So you need to release the lateral structures during release of the tibio-talar joint, but never go to the medial side. Because if you dissect the, if you progress the seizure on the medial side, there is a chance that you can release the deep part of the deltoid ligament, which will ultimately cause instability of the ankle joint. But if you come to the inferior joint, that is the talocalcaneal joints, you need to release from lateral to posterior. The lateral part, there is another ligament is called fibula to calcaneum, that is the calcaneofibular ligament, and medial side, that is a part of deltoid ligament, which also should be addressed. So proper release of the posterior, both the ligaments, both the joints and capsules is very important. Sometimes if you see the X-ray in a late presenting clubfoot, because why I have given that this X-ray, because if you see the posterior joints, the talus looks something forward, because when you approach the joint from the posterior, it is very difficult to find both the joints. So you need to be very careful not to release only. There is a chance that you miss one joint and release other joint, but that should not be the way. So tibiotalar and talocalcaneal, both the joints properly released. And here during release procedure, this is little bit difficult. It is time taking. You need to be very patient, and better not to use knife during this release process, because the bones are so soft, it's very difficult to find that it might cut during the release process. So better to use blunt scissor during the dissection process on the posterior side. After the dissection, you need to fix the joint. Usually the talonavicular joint is fixed by smooth caver, and similarly the calcaneonavicular joint is also fixed. I missed one point. Initially, after the release of the tibiotalar and talocalcaneal joints, there are also few ligaments called interosseous ligament or talocalcaneal ligaments. It is preferred not to touch the talocalcaneal ligaments, because after the release of all the joints, you just advise to passively use a movement. If the calcaneum, if can be properly varus to valgus manipulated, there's no need to cut the talocalcaneal interosseous ligament, because unnecessary over dissection of the talocalcaneal ligament might lead to apparent deformity, and that is very difficult to manage for over dissection of these ligaments. So after the dissection, you need to fix the joints. Talonavicular joints usually fixed with a smooth caver, and also talocalcaneal joints, and we suture with interrupted suture. And after that, you put up above the back slab. Few group of people, they change the dressing again and check again, and a few do keep it for 6 weeks. It's always, because there is a chance of skin necrosis, it is always advisable, preferable to check the wound after 48 hours to see there is a necrosis of the skin or not. I told Mr. Vivacich that there is excessive release of the structures which is not required to release. Sometimes it's cause a deformity like that, the planovalgus deformity, and this corrections is little bit difficult and problematic later on. Other corrections apart from soft tissues, now I shall discuss some about is the bony osteotomy corrections. In the bony osteotomy, what we commonly do is the forefoot varus portion. We do the lateral closed wedge and medial open edge osteotomy. What we do for the lateral closed wedge, commonly we do the lateral V-shaped osteotomy of the cuboid bone, and one osteotomy on the medial cuneiform. After that, the lateral portion, the bone chuck we release, we take it out from the cuboid and insert it in the medial cuneiform and fix it with caver. So there are other bones also for lateral closed wedge. We commonly prefer the cuboid bone, where this is called Fowler's technique. But this lateral closed wedge can be done in different joints also, like if it can be released for anterior portion of the calcaneum. This is called Lichbauer technique. This calcaneocuboid joints also can be cut and fused. So there are different techniques of lateral closed wedge. Another technique for osteotomy, if there is a excessive heel varus, if the deformity in the calcaneum only, then we can release you can do the closed wedge, lateral closed wedge osteotomy of the calcaneum. But one thing we should keep in mind, if we do the calcaneal osteotomy, it actually does not correct the whole mechanics. So if it is only purely bony calcaneal varus, then you can do this DARS osteotomy, but it is not commonly done nowadays usually. until unless it's a purely bony calcaneal varus deformity. There are some other salvage procedures like triple arthrodesis. In Campbell, it has been written that if the patient presents around 10 years of age, and according to the textbook that Campbell, that after 10 years of age, triple arthrodesis is a choice. What do you mean by the triple arthrodesis? It is 3 joint. There is a talocalcaneal joint, calcaneocuboid joint, and talonavicular joint. And to release all the cartilaginous portions and fix it with cavers and plaster. The cause of failure of this triple arthrodesis might be due to improper release of the joint surface. So we need to be very careful during release of the joint surface and fix it properly. And usually we don't need to put any screws for this fixation. With adult triple arthrodesis, they used to screw plate, etc. But many of the surgeons, majority of surgeons, I think, use this just a caver after triple arthrodesis fixation, and it's a plaster, which is sufficient for salvage procedure also. In syndromic clubfoot, like arthrogryposis, whatever you do, sometimes it does not give a satisfactory result and give multiple recurrence. And therefore, that syndromic kit, this is also a choice like talectomy, the excision of the entire talus. And this is like talectomy is like similarly, that is why talectomy is also a salvage procedure. Josie's external fixation stabilization. So Josie's external stabilization system, or JES external fixation, is also an important tool for CTV late presenting cases, especially for the very stiff foot, or sometimes even after the PMST or soft tissue surgery, there is a fixed recurrence. For that, you don't have any much choice. We can use some JES distractor. It was very popular previously, but nowadays the parents are not readily accept this JES fixator because they need to maintain the JES and some issues. But definitely, this is a very good technique for the stiff and post PMSTR recurrence surgeries. JES fixation can be done. Ilizarov is also another tool for external fixation. This is also done by some of our surgeons. I don't have any personal experience, but this is also a very good tool for very stiff foot and elderly child and late presenting child. Thank you. And I think we should open the discussion for our senior teachers and Sadhgurus, and we can have an interactive discussion also.
Thank you, Dr. Soumya. So you have concisely covered most of the aspects of relapse and late presenting clubfoot. It was a good lecture for the postgraduates. I invite Dr. Alaric and Dr. Matthew Verghese to take over the proceedings.
Alaric, you need to unmute yourself.
Soumya, that was a great presentation. Venkat, I just want to ask you, is there something like a case presentation, or is it just an interactive discussion between the mentors?
Alaric, it's just interaction between the mentors, and they will ask questions that Venkat will ask you.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay. So I'll begin by commenting on what Soumya has said, that it was a great exposition of these two very important things that come in the exam, the relapsed clubfoot and the neglected one, or what we call walking age clubfoot. I would just put a point here that I agree with what Soumya has said when it comes to the relapsed clubfoot. There are really 2 or 3 important causes for relapse. And I think the 2 most important ones, of course, are the understanding of the importance of abduction of almost 70 degrees. And it took Ponseti some time to understand the importance of that as well. There's a nice paper from him which shows that the first series of patients that he treated in the 50s to the 80s, where he did not understand the importance of the 70 degrees of abduction, and the relapse rate there was as high as 45 to 50%. But once he started abducting it to more than 70 degrees, his relapse rate fell down drastically to just 15%. So just that one thing really brought down the relapse rate by 2/3. And that's something in our hands. And I think that was brought across very nicely by Soumya, where he showed us that picture where the foot is not abducted enough. And I agree that for the younger child, getting that amount of abduction is extremely important. Of course, you have to understand that when you're dealing with an older child who's probably more than a year of age, then that 70 degrees of abduction does not hold true. This is mainly for the younger ones. The second important cause for relapse, of course, is, as he has said, the dynamic supination. The second important cause is the lack of the braceware. And that again was what Ponseti realized over the years. So for him, it was an evolving scenario. Over the many years that he treated club feet, these are the two important causes that he realized: the lack of that abduction in the last cast, and the fact that patients are often not compliant or adherent with the instructions for braceware. And there's many articles shown after that that children who use the brace as per the recommended protocol have a lower incidence of relapse. The third cause, of course, is in the older child. Once you start walking, is the dynamic supination, which is caused because of muscle imbalance between the tibialis anterior and the peronei. And as he has rightly pointed out, the treatment for that would be to transfer the tibialis anterior tendon. But the age for that is generally an older child who's approximately between the ages of 3 to 5 years. It's very rare to do the surgery below the age of 3. People who have done it in a younger age have found that the chance of relapse is extremely high. So the results are poor when you do it in a very young child because of various factors like the bone is not ossified yet, the tendon does not adhere to its new position, and therefore it's rarely recommended in a child who's less than 2.5 years. When it comes to the neglected club foot, and I'm sure Matthew will bear out with me on this, I think I will have to slightly disagree with Soumya on that. You know, when it comes to our exams, we must understand that textbooks can be quite outdated. And just because our examiners are a little senior, we should not assume that they don't read recent literature. In fact, I would say that the treatment of neglected clubfoot has evolved so much in the last 15 years that it's not something that has been reported, you know, a couple of years ago. I think the first publication came out from Lorenzo and Morquende in 2007. So that's like 13 years ago, where they showed that the Ponseti method works even in the older child. And over time, at the last count that I remember, there are almost 15 publications in peer-reviewed literature which have shown that the Ponseti method works even in the older child. And that age has been gradually increasing. It began with Shalam Khan and Dr. Mehtani from Delhi, who showed that it works in toddlers, then up to the age of 5 years. Our recent paper in 2018 showed that even up to the age of 10, it is effective. So I think it's safe to say, if you're giving an exam in India and you have got literature from India which are shown so powerfully that the Ponseti method works even in the older child, I don't think you should be quoting literature from textbooks written by foreign authors, which are quite outdated in today's day and age. Textbooks are not revised for 5 years or more at a time, and often literature precedes what we have seen in textbooks. So I would say there's a case to make. And out of those 15 articles which have been described, there are almost 5 of those articles from India. So, there's no reason not to quote those articles when you are in the exam, and you can say with pride that several articles from India have shown that the Ponseti method does work.
Okay, Alaric, we have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So one of them is, in the present scenario, can we comment on posteromedial soft tissue release as one of the mode of management? One of the delegates have asked it, one of the students. So can we comment on
when you say current scenario means because of the pandemic?
No, not for
or in today's DNA.
Yeah, so you said that Ponseti can be used as a primary method of treatment for late presenting as well.
Definitely. I think, for the exam, you should not only be reading textbooks, but you should be reading literature. And as I said, that literature is 15 years old. It's not yesterday's literature. It's 15 years old, which has said that the Ponseti method does work. So at whatever age, I know Matthew has probably treated adults who are even maybe 15 or 20 years of age, and so have we. But those are anecdotal reports. They have not been reported yet. As far as current literature goes, 10 years definitely has been successfully reported with the Ponseti method. And your argument in the exam is that You can use the Ponseti method for all club feet at all ages. And if it's not successful after multiple attempts, you can always resort to surgery later on. So that's something you can always quote. Matthew, I think maybe you should step in at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Alaric. Thank you. I agree with you entirely on these issues that you have touched. For the postgraduate, the worry is some of the senior examiners that come there, they may not be fully conversant with the older child Ponseti method. So the way to get out of this tricky situation, there'll be one examiner at least who is doing this. So you will have support from one of the examiners at least. But practically, what you say is that, sir, the foot is showing some degree of correction when we manipulate. And because it's showing some degree of correction, I expect by doing Ponseti's method, I expect correction. And if it gets corrected, well and good. If it gets partially corrected, then at least the magnitude of surgery that is required will be much less than without Ponseti casting. So in any case, you're wise to go in for casting. Sir, this is the deformity in an older child. It is still a reasonably supple foot, and doing Ponseti manipulation shows that there is some correction happening. I will start with serial casting, counsel the parents, start with serial casting. If it gets fully corrected, well and good. If it doesn't, the magnitude of surgery required for further correction is much less than before. So that will pacify most of the aggressive examiners also. So how to get out of a tricky situation when the examiner, I know my own postgraduate, when he said Ponseti in a 5-year-old child, the examiner jumped, oh, what are you doing? So it happened, it's real life. So it happened. So you need to be diplomatic enough to be able to get out of a tricky situation. You will reduce the magnitude of surgery. You will try Ponseti. And as Alaric said, 100% I agree with him, what he said on this. So that's one. The second thing, the questions that were there, Venkat, I was noting down the questions. Can I take them on one by one also? Okay, so one of the questions was, in today's time, should we comment on PMSTR? Now look, an idiopathic clubfoot that you have presenting to you, by and large, as Alaric and Soumya also mentioned, up to 10, 12 years, they can be corrected by Ponseti's method. However, a child who has had surgery before, a child who had some intervention before, who has a stiff foot, may not be amenable to full correction by the Ponseti method. Therefore, if the examiner now asks you, okay, my dear boy, you have started Ponseti's cast and it is not correcting, then what will you do? Sir, now I can try posteromedial soft tissue release, and Soumya has beautifully elaborated what all things you cut and what all things you release in posteromedial soft tissue release. So you should know all the important steps. They will ask you about masternode of Henry. They'll ask you about the superficial deltoid. They'll ask you about the posterior calcaneofibular ligament. Those are important ligaments that you need to release. The plantar calcaneonavicular. So this is what you have to understand. So you need to know it, but most idiopathic club feet will be able to be corrected by the Ponseti's. The non-idiopathic syndromic ones are very difficult. These may need open releases. The surgical ones, which have had 1 or 2 or 3 surgeries, and the foot is a rigid club foot. When you say it is rigid, you try to manipulate it and no correction is happening. You do the Ponseti maneuver and see, is it happening in terms of movement of the subtalar joint? Is the calcaneum moving when you do the Ponseti maneuver? If it is not moving at all, then your results of doing any Ponseti's manipulation, you will still try it, but the success rate will be low, and you need to be ready with the previously scarred tissue there. Operating in, it's a real challenge. Operating multiply operated posteromedial soft tissue or Cincinnati or any of the open procedures, going back in, it's all scarred adherent tissue. Those are challenges, and in the more than 10 years plus 12, 14 older patients, there you would consider Ilizarov or one of those external fixation methods. That is the indication for those methods. Open posterior middle soft tissues redo is very difficult in the previously operated case. The next question is, what is the most common deformity to recur? The most common deformity to recur is equinus. That's the most common. And if you remember, the equinus posture of the heel also goes with varus. That's normal subtalar kinematic coupled movement. So if the normal foot is held in equinus, the heel naturally goes into varus. So when you say the most common deformity, which is visible to the parents, it is equinus, and that is difficulty in squatting. So all children that come to you, older child with clubfoot, you want to check for it doesn't look completely in equinus, it's neutral. You get the patient to squat, and that's an exercise for all these patients for assessment. Squatting, they'll not be able to squat. They'll keep their heels up because squatting needs dorsiflexion of the ankle, at least 15 degrees of dorsiflexion. If you can't dorsiflex your foot, the child cannot squat. So you should do this and demonstrate, sir, the child cannot squat. He has a residual equinus, and that's a sign of recurrence in this child. And if there is a frank equinus, there'll be varus also associated. Okay, so up to what age can you do Ponseti? Alaric has beautifully answered that question. You can do it till 12, 13, 14. I have done it till 17 also. So you can get corrections. What is the problem in the older child? You have a problem of the structural changes in the bones. The bones in a newborn baby are predominantly cartilaginous. As they grow older, the cartilage, quite unlike the diaphyseal bones where have the physis at the ends of the bones, these bones do not have separate physis. The ossific nucleus is there. The articular cartilage is also part of the growing cartilage. So they have very small ossific nucleus with large cartilages. And these cartilages over a period of time mature enough to become bones. More old the child, more the bone with structural deformity. In older patients, there is structural deformity. So even if you correct by manipulation, there will be still structural changes. So as Soumya beautifully demonstrated, you have to combine with a bony procedure. Maybe a decancellation, maybe a calcaneocuboid fusion, maybe an osteotomy of the Doyer type, which corrects the deformity, but it accepts the subtalar or the deformity that is in the joint. There is a deformity in the joint, but you correct it externally, extra-articularly you correct the joint. Triple arthrodesis is the last resort, usually reserved for a skeletally mature patient. And when does the foot mature skeletally? In girls, around 12. In boys, about 12 to 14, somewhere in that age. So those patients you can do, but by and large, what we have been seeing is you can correct them reasonably well by Ponseti, and they do well. Yeah. Sorry, I missed the question.
Some more questions are there.
Yeah.
They wanted to know about atypical clubfoot. One of the delegates have asked about atypical clubfoot.
Alaric, you want to take on? I'll answer.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. See, let me explain the history behind this. There was a conference, I think it was Portugal. Alaric, you can correct me if you remember differently, where some of the early stalwarts who were fellows of Ponseti were meeting together on the Ponseti's treatment of clubfoot. And there, at an evening dinner, the people that were there, Monica Naguera, Jose Marquende, I think Shafiq Pirani, Nogro Penny, they were all there. At dinner, one of them raised the point, you know, I have some of these children who are not getting corrected properly. So then Monica said, she's from Brazil. She said, no, I also have some of these children. Then the other person said, Norgrove said, yes, I also have said some of these children. And then one of them said, you know, there is something atypical about them. So the expression atypical came from there at that dinner table. And subsequently, it continued to be used And what were these atypicals? So then they describe the atypical features and they become classical features. The atypical features in the classical description were a short, stubby foot, a clawing of the great toe, a shortened great toe shorter than the second toe, a deep plantar crease on the medial side running across the sole of the foot to the lateral side, a deep plantar crease. And there is, in the acute phase when it comes on, they have edema on the foot dorsum, also at times erythema on the feet, along with a tenderness on palpation of these feet. Many of these feet also have a bowing of the tibia. So this combination where shortened great toe, clawing of the great toe, short stubby foot, deep plantar crease running across to the lateral side with edema on the dorsum, with some erythema on the dorsum, with bowing of the leg, altogether is an expression for atypical clubfoot. Now, further on, Ponseti wrote an article on this where he described them as complex clubfoot. Now, the current literature is, then they started looking at these kind of deep plantar crease running across to the lateral side. When they reviewed this, many of the children who've never had any casting, so these are children who had casting and they developed this deformity. And usually it is a slipping of the cast that caused it. But many children had the same deformity, but no tenderness, no edema. The foot wasn't so bad, but there was a deeper crease running across to the lateral side. And the great toe was a little shorter. They appear de novo, without any casting have ever been done or without any treatment having ever been done. So the current understanding on this is, so the nomenclature is atypical for a de novo deformity which looks like the original atypical, and the original atypical, which is post-treatment atypical, has been now classified as a complex club. So the nomenclature for these two are clearly different. Atypical is used for de novo and complex is used for, now you won't find this in textbooks. That is the problem. So you may use this interchangeably. Even Ponseti has used it interchangeably. They mean the same thing, except for a very small number. What numbers? I had a series of cases on atypical, of original atypical, which is now classified as complex cases. Among 22 cases, I had 2 de novo one, which had no treatment history at all. When they came to me, within the first week of presentation, they had a plantar crease which is running across. So identification is easy. They would have had treatment by Ponseti's casting, and after the third or the fourth cast, the cast slips and they present with typical features of short foot, severe equinus. They all have severe equinus. The foot is in line with the tibia, which is bowed also. So you have a severe equinus in these patients. That's because the cylindrical portion of the cast goes back and the heel goes into the cylindrical portion of the cast. So they have also an expression there, a squashed heel. A squashed heel. A heel is extended backward because that is there. You try to correct this by a regular Ponseti casting, it will not get corrected because it is only on the fourth or the third cast it is coming. By then the talar head is almost reduced. What has happened here? The deformity is the tarso-metatarsal joint, and therefore there is a plantar flexion, severe plantar flexion of the metatarsals, and therefore this has to be corrected by dorsiflexion of the metatarsals in relation to the tarsals. The fulcrum here is now different. Fulcrum is original Ponseti is the talonavicular joint. In complex or complex clubfoot, which is post-treatment, it is the tarso-metatarsal joint. So you have your finger on the dorsum, on the tarsal bones, and the thumb on the plantar surface. So you have the, I don't know whether you can see it or not. So this is on the dorsal side, index finger on the tarsal bone, and the thumb on the balls of the heads of the metatarsal, and you dorsiflex it. So the fulcrum here is the tarso-metatarsal. Have I made it clear?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And one of them have asked, when should we do tenotomy in atypical club feet?
Atypical clubfoot or complex clubfoot post-treatment, when, as I said, by the fourth cast, the cast has slipped. Why? Initially, again, I'll go to this. See, the foot is like this. The cast doesn't slip because of this portion of the foot is deformed like that. Next cast, the foot is like this. The next cast, the foot is like this, and then it comes in line with the tibia. Can you see that? It has come in line with the tibia. Now the cast slips down, especially if it is a bulky cast or over padded or not a good groin to toe cast, or the knee is not in 90-degree flexion. These are all factors that encourage development of a complex club. So once you have this, you have the sure formula for the cast to slip, toes disappear. Disappearing toes are a danger sign. They contribute to complex club. So that is what you have to remember. So disappearing toes, always warn the parents, take the cast off at home, because otherwise you'll end up with a complex club. So once you have that, then you do a cast holiday. Cast holiday for at least 3 weeks or so. After that, you restart using the modified Ponseti regime, exactly as I told you. The dorsiflexion using the tarsometatarsal joint as the function, as the fulcrum. Once you've done that, this is getting corrected, then you may need 1 more or 2 more casts in abduction as in the classical cast. But usually you probably need only 1, and then you do a tenotomy. However, there are some very chubby children in which, despite your best efforts, you've tried everything, it is still slipping. You've increased the flexion to 110 degrees. You've done a well-molded cast yourself, minimum padding, groin to toe, everything you've taken care of. Still it is slipping. Then in such cases, you may do what is known as, and this can be done in syndromic club feet also. When the cast is slipping too frequently, then you do what is known as an early tenotomy, and that's called a holding tenotomy. So that the foot goes into a little dorsiflexion, so the slipping of the cast is less. When the foot is in dorsiflexion, it is at lesser angle than the acute, the straight angle line, that is foot and the tibia, doesn't slip if it is at an angle there. So that's a holding tenotomy. But otherwise, after the dorsiflexion has been achieved at the tarsometatarsal joint, you will do a tenotomy. To what age Pirani scoring is valid? See, Pirani's original paper was a 10-point scoring system, which is what is quoted in the Campbell's orthopedic. I don't know what is the latest Campbell. I have not looked at it. Alaric, do you know that? What does the latest Campbell says?
No, I don't.
I don't know. Somebody can educate me on that. So this is something which you have to remember. So if you see the correction that we have in such cases, we look at the Pirani scoring has 3 midfoot component, 3 hindfoot components. Pirani described the original score in less than 1-year-old child, and he tried to validate it by looking at the outcomes, by looking at, has the talonavicular joint reduced? Has the ankle joint come into true dorsiflexion? It is not a false rocker bottom that's happening. So he validated by looking at each one of these components means something, and that will tell you, is it validated or not validated? Does it really represent an inter-observer? Intra-observer reliability was also looked at. So that validation was done only up to 1 year. However, we are regularly using it in the older patient. What are the limitations in using it in an older patient? The limitations are creases are not reliable, both medial and posterior crease. That's first part. Number 2, if the child has begun to walk, the heel, empty heel sign is not that reliable. But if there has been no true correction of equinus ever, empty heel sign will still be positive, as most often we see in an arthrogrypotic foot. So that's what you have to remember. Validation only to less than 1. More than 1, we still use it with understanding that some of these parameters may not be completely reliable.
Yeah, so I will add something to the Pirani score question that have been asked. Can it be used for surgically treated cases, and at what Pirani score do we do a tenotomy? So I would say that the Pirani score is not specific to any particular type of clubfoot. It's a form of scoring system like the DiMeglio score to grade the severity of the clubfoot. It's a bit subjective, no doubt, but the reason why it's become so popular is because it's simple to understand and to use. So you can use it for idiopathic clubfoot, for a syndromic clubfoot, for a previously operated clubfoot. But you must understand what are the fallacies of the Pirani score, as Matthew has rightly pointed out, that in the older child, some of those items that are there are not really valid or reliable. And that's why since the last couple of years, we have a couple of other scores which have come out, which many of you may not be aware of. One is called the Paver score, which is described by Tim Nunn, which uses plantaris, adductus, varus, equinus, and rotation. And here the score is out of 30. And if you have a score which is more than 18, it represents a fairly rigid clubfoot. This has not become very popular yet because it's just recently been described. But I think that's the way forward to go, because the Pirani score, as has been originally devised, was for the younger child. Are people using it? Yes, all of us are. In fact, in most of our programs, that's the score that we use across the board, right from birth till even 10 years of age. Yeah. So it's not wrong that you describe the Pirani score for the older child, but we must understand the limitations as the child grows older. Pirani has also come out with a score for the older child. So the same group that has described the Pirani score came out with what's called the PBS score. Pirani, Baum, and Sinclair. So two of his associates came out with the PBS score. So you don't need to know the details of that. All that you need to know is that there are two other scores which have been described for the older child. The Paver is a simpler score. The PBS is a much more complicated score, which looks at the gait, looks at various static parameters.
It's not time to do the scoring. That is the problem.
Yeah.
So in the exam, so when they get a case, so what all they should mention actually? So usually in a typical orthopedic examination, we say look, feel, and move, and then measure. So are there anything in particular you want to tell the students that they should not miss while presenting a late presenting or a neglected clubfoot?
Right.
Yeah, they can certainly, everybody knows about the Pirani score. They can certainly say that, sir, the lateral border is curved and it is as per the original Pirani concept. It is score of 0.5 or 1. The medial crease is there. The cavus is there, which doesn't appear in the scoring as such, but you can describe it as your physical finding. The talar head is definitely palpable laterally, but it is partially corrected when you manipulate it. Equinus is there, it is not correctable. Score is 1. Empty heel, again, you can still feel the calcaneum. It is not so soft. Most of the time it's either 0.5 or it's 0 in a walking child. And the posterior crease, the moment the child starts walking, see what does the crease represent? Crease represents some degree of movement of the joint. And if the joint is moved even with some equinus, when he started walking, some correction is happening, plantar flexion is happening, some degree of dorsiflexion is happening if he is walking. So the crease appears multiple. It's not a single crease, it's not a deep crease. So that is why the creases are not so reliable in a walking child. So that's what you have to remember. The equinus is reliable, but you have to remember the talar head is reliable, lateral border is reliable. What is not reliable are the posterior crease, the medial crease, the empty heel. 3 things that are not reliable.
Thank you, sir.
So I think we are presenting a case of the Pirani score should be a standard conventional method of describing a clubfoot should be to go by the standard methods of begin with your inspection, describe how the foot looks, the shape and the size of the foot compared to the opposite side, especially if it's unilateral. Focus on the 4 main features of clubfoot, which is the cave deformity, cavus, adductus, varus, and equinus. And describe each of them in measurements. I've seen a lot of people don't do that, so you must say the cavus is of so many degrees, the adductus is so much, the varus is so much, and the equinus is so much. So you must also mention the degree of the deformity, because remember it's an orthopedic exam. So just saying there's varus is not of any use unless you tell me there's 20 degrees of varus is important information for me, or there's 40 degrees of equinus is important information for me. So mention all the 4 deformities, cavus, adductus, varus, equinus, and quantify them. And the next step will be to look at the correctability, because remember there's a deformity, but there's also correctability. So mention how much is the deformity, but how much is it correctable to? So that is also an important aspect of your measurements. And then talk of the Pirani score. Remember that Ponseti himself never used the Pirani score. The Pirani score is being used by most of us because it's simple to understand, but it's not the most objective method of describing it. That's why there are many people who still use the DeBegno method, because it quantifies the degree of the deformity using a goniometer. That's what we should still do. So I don't think in the exam you should straight away say that this is a club foot with a Pirani score of 6 by 6, because that's not very effective. I think what's more important to describe each element of the deformity, talk of CAVE, quantify each of them, talk of the correctability of each of them, talk of the presence of a dynamic problem if there is any, and then say this corresponds with the Pirani score of so much and so much. So the Pirani score comes for me right in the end of my examination of a club foot. Again, how to use the Pirani score to decide about a tenotomy. And I think, again, the focus should not be on the Pirani score. Remember, it's just one of the methods, and it should not be for us to focus on the Pirani score when we examine or treat a club foot. How do we decide when the foot is ripe for a tenotomy? So I think the 3 important points here are that 1, the lateral head of the talus is entirely covered by the navicular. That's the most important thing. That means you've got a full correction of the forefoot, midfoot complex. The heel should be neutral or in slight degree of valgus, but you can't accept a varus heel to do a tenotomy. And then you can say that the Pirani score at this point, the midfoot score should roughly be 0.5 or 0, and the hindfoot score is generally more than 1. So I don't think you should just use the Pirani score to make any decisions or to quantify a club foot, because it's just one aspect of a club foot. So the 3 important things when to do a tenotomy: 1, the lateral head of the talus is completely covered by the navicular. 2, the heel is neutral or in slight valgus. And 3, this corresponds with a Pirani midfoot score of 0.5 or 0 and a hindfoot score of more than 1. I think both those points are important, because if you have a slight amount of a crease and it still scores 0.5 on the midfoot score, it's still okay to do a tenotomy if the first 2 points are met. If the hindfoot score is less than 1, if it's 0.5 or 0, there's no need for a tenotomy. So therefore, you must break up the Pirani in both the midfoot and the hindfoot scores. But more important is the coverage of the talar head and the position of the heel before you do a tenotomy. So don't put too much of emphasis on the Pirani score, because that's not the only thing which guides us to our decision making.
Right. So Dr. Soumya, is there any question for you on the WhatsApp? Soumya? Do you have any questions on your WhatsApp, Dr. Soumya Paik?
So there are other questions that I'm seeing here.
Yeah, Ellery, please answer those questions about the incision and all that. Yeah.
So incision for the PMR, so this is, again, you should report what you have seen. Now, I understand a lot of you younger guys or girls may not have really seen a soft tissue release, because it becomes so rare nowadays. But if you have had the fortune of seeing one, you should report exactly what you see. In India, the posterior medial incision has become quite popular, because for some reason the Turco method became popular in India. But there are enough people who have used the Cincinnati approach as well. So whatever method, remember, it's just a way of reaching the various joints and ligaments and tendons. The incision is not the most crucial one. We have used both the Turco posterior medial incision and the Cincinnati incision. Both of them have their advantages and disadvantages, and there's no way to say that one is better than the other. As long as you can do what you set out to do, to release whatever necessary structures you have to release. But I think in today's day and age, it's important, as Matthew has pointed out and Soumya has pointed out, that what we're trying to do here is to reduce the amount or the extent of surgery that we are doing. So I don't think they're using these big incisions any longer now. We're using small incisions medially, posteriorly, laterally, wherever it's required to do your work. So the focus here should be the less surgery is always better for the child when it comes to a club foot. Anything else on the question?
Yeah, one more question we asked: how
Somebody
to place
asked a question on
measuring the deformity. Alaric.
Sorry?
So you told that you should mention the measurement of the deformity. So one of the student have asked how to place the goniometer for each of the
I
deformity.
think that's extremely important. Like if we measure any joint, we must know how to examine the foot and which plane is to be examined. So remember, you've got 4 deformities. You have got cavus, adductus, varus, equinus. For the cavus, you look at the foot from the side, generally the medial side. All right. And there you see the amount that the first metatarsal has dropped down. So the extent of first metatarsal dropping down is what the cavus is. So your goniometer is there. So that's a fulcrum over the talar head. That's one limb on the heel and one limb on the forefoot. And that measures the extent of your cavus. Then you come to adductus. For the adductus, you need to look at the plantar aspect of the foot because that's how the foot is turned in. So again, the center of the foot is where your fulcrum is. One part of the goniometer is around the heel and the other one is around the midfoot. And that's usually with the third metatarsal because that's the center of the midfoot. And not only do you measure that in the static position, but I think you should measure it also with correctability. So just don't measure it in the deformed position, but also see with correction how much is the amount of the adductus. So that's for the adductus. For the heel varus, you look at the foot from behind because that's where the heel is. You're looking with the long axis of the tibia and you're looking to see where the heel is. So the fulcrum is at the ankle joint, one arm along the tibia and one arm is along the very short heel which is behind. So you're looking to see the amount of heel varus from behind. And finally, you come to the equinus, and that again is seen from the side because you put the fulcrum at the ankle joint, one arm along the tibia and one along the foot. So the plane of how you measure is important to measure all 4 of these deformities.
Thank you. Thank you, all the presidents. I think we
There
don't
was
have
a
any other.
question. There was a question on difference in management of relapsed and recurrent club feet.
Yeah.
We have looked at the literature on this. We also talked to experts on this. Technically, there is no difference between relapse and recurrence. So please do not confuse. Some very old examiners are fond of asking us. There is no difference between the two in literature, relapse and recurrence. There's one question in between, Dennis Brown splint or Steenbeek brace. That question was there in between. I would like to answer that. You see,
Sure, sir.
what is the principle of management of the maintenance part of Ponsonby's treatment? Ponsonby's treatment has a manipulation and casting part and tenotomy, and the next part is the maintenance part. Maintenance part, bracing is critical. As Alaric mentioned, the recurrence rate was almost 50% in the earlier stages of Ponsonby's management, when the brace protocol were not very good. So therefore, the whole concept of bracing continued initially for 1 year, then 2 years, 3 years. Currently, it's 4 to 5 years, depending on how the foot is, looking at dynamic deformities and all those things. So you decide on that protocol. Dennis Brown splint has been described. If you look up journal articles, many of them described the foot abduction brace as Dennis Brown splint. So that is where the confusion comes. So many think it is Dennis Brown splint, and the peer-reviewed articles that are there published, Dennis Brown post Ponsonby, we are giving Dennis Brown splint. There is a subtle difference. The classical Dennis Brown splint has only a 15-degree abduction. Okay, so can you use that? No. After correction in an infant up to 2-3 years, you need 70 degrees of abduction. So if you have a Dennis Brown splint, your orthotists are the traditional orthotists. They learn from their textbooks, and in their textbooks, Dennis Brown splint external rotation 15 degrees. But it can easily be corrected. There's a butterfly nut at the bottom, and that can be changed to a 70-degree abduction. So you say that, sir, I will use the foot abduction brace with the foot outwardly directed to about 70 degrees of abduction. Whether you call it Dennis Brown with 70-degree abduction or a Steenbeek brace, Mikkel Steenbeek was a physiotherapist working with Dr. Shafiq Pirani and Norgro Penny in Uganda, in the Uganda Clubfoot program. The original Mitchell brace made by John Mitchell in his clinic for pauncity was the Mitchell brace. It is about 400 to 600 US dollars. Too expensive for the Uganda Clubfoot program. Therefore, they decided using local materials, local steel, local leather, local plywood. Mikkel Steenbeek created this brace, and that's why it's called a Steenbeek brace. But remember, the important thing is the abduction of 70 degrees. In the older children, 3 years plus, 4 years plus, they do not tolerate the 70-degree abduction. You need to reduce it to maybe about 50 degrees or so. But that's important. So Dennis Brown splint, somebody is asking the cost. Every orthotist will make it for you. It's locally made. It's not industry manufactured. It's locally made. Steenbeek brace also, we get it made locally using disabled workers. That's what it is. So Dennis Brown, in the literature, it will say, articles will say post-treatment Dennis Brown splint was used. But remember, it's Dennis Brown splint with 70-degree abduction. They're all right?
Thank you, sir.
There's some question about modified Pirani score. I'm not aware of what is the modified Pirani score.
Actually,
do you know?
the 6 point is...
The 6-point version is the modified Pirani score.
Well, okay. So, well, that's the established one. You know, the 10.1 was just the initial description, as Matthew rightly said, and they found that 4 items from that were not really relevant or had a good reliability, and therefore, for the last 20 years now, the one which has been used is the 6-point score. So that's what you would be using.
Yeah, the 70-degree abduction is because in a normal child, the normal foot goes up to 70 degrees of abduction. So you're trying to restore normalcy. If it is restricted, that means correction is not fully. So if you have done the pauncity manipulation, before the tenotomy, there'll be about 30 degrees of abduction possible. After tenotomy, 70-degree abduction should be possible in an infant because that is normal subtalar ankle joint combined movement. So therefore, you're trying to restore normal.
And I will add here that this criterion of 70 degrees is for the younger child. If you have a child who's walking age, you might not be able to achieve that 70 degrees of abduction. And if you have a syndromic child, for example, you have one with arthrogryposis or spina bifida where
You can't get
stiff. So remember, there are these two caveats that if you have an older child or if you have a syndromic foot, that you don't use 70 degrees, you turn it out by around 30 to 40 degrees.
All right. So anything else, Alaric? Note on reverse pauncity, that is for CVT, which is out of...
That's not part of our discussion.
Yeah, discussion. So then I think we can...
CVT, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Should we comment on the degree of external rotation, the FAB? Yes, I think as Matthew rightly said, so the conventional method has been, if you have a unilateral club foot, you turn out the affected foot by 70 degrees and the normal foot by 40 degrees, 35 to 40 degrees. But there is a school of thought among people who, even if it's a unilateral club foot, would turn both out by 70 degrees, So, of course, that's not validated yet in literature, so maybe don't mention it, but I'm just giving you a thought to understand that when we talk of this external rotation of the foot, there's some amount coming from the foot, a large amount of the foot, but there's also some coming from the hips. And you have to understand, if you keep your limbs externally rotated, it's so much harder to adduct the foot. So that external rotation that we talk of is coming from the foot, but it's also coming from external rotation of the hip joints. And that's the reasoning why you talk of that amount of abduction.
So actually you have to recognize, if you keep the knee fully extended, most of the abduction is at the hip joint. It's only when you flex the knee joint that the abduction stress comes on the foot subtalar joint. So that is what you have to understand. On extension, it is all at the hip joint. On flexion, a lot of stress is at the knee joint also, as well as there is abduction happening. In fact, Anil Agarwal had a very nice concept on this dynamicity of the foot abduction brace Dr. Anil Agrawal from Chacha Nehru Bal Chikitsalaya. The dynamicity of the foot abduction brace based on flexion and extension of the knee joint.
There's one question I think Soumya can answer. There's one that says, what do you mean by dynamic supination deformity? So maybe Soumya, you could answer that.
So I already mentioned previously the dynamic supination usually in the normal, the patients do not have any fixed deformity. You do not see any cavus, adduction, varus, and equinus. But when the child attempted walking or attempted standing, there's a foot gets supinated. So this is a dynamic situation. That is why it's dynamic, because in normal situation when the child is lying down, when examining the child, you cannot find any deformity. When attempted standing and attempted walking, there is a supination of the foot.
Yeah, so basically this is because of an imbalance. There is a strong tibialis anterior contraction, and that's what causes the dynamic supination. Remember that when you examine a foot which looks to have dynamic supination, you must always rule out the fact that there's no static deformity as well. A lot of these children have a combination of a dynamic supination with a static deformity, and then only treating it with a tibialis anterior tendon transfer is not right. First, correct the static deformity with a series of casts, get the foot to get completely corrected statically, and then only do your tendon transfer to correct the dynamic supination.
Right. So there are no more questions after this. In that case, I think we've come to the end of the session today. I would like to thank all the residents who joined us today and participated in the interactive discussion. And I would like to thank our Guru, Dr. Soumya Paik, and Sadhguru Sarik and Matthew for their words of wisdom. I'm sure all the residents would have benefited a lot. And final word of thanks to our POSI President, Dr. Dhiren Ganjwala, and Hitesh Shah, who have joined us today. And I would also like to thank Dr. Srikunj Patel, who has arranged for this meeting on the Zoom platform. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Dr. Dhiren.
Yeah. No, just we would like to tell about the next webinar or the PG Gurukul. That's on the 17th of August, and the topic is Perthes disease. And I also request residents please let us know the topic of your interest so that we can include them in the future session also. Thank you once again. Yeah, please, Venkat. Yeah.
You can send your feedbacks to the email ID where you got the link today. So it will be useful for us to improve the program, and also you can send the topics of interest for the future sessions to the same email ID which I had sent to you today.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Alaric. Bye-bye, Matthew.
Bye,
Soumya, very
bye.
good. Bye.
Good job, Soumya.
Matthew sir, bye. Alaric, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Hitesh.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sir. Good
Thank
night, sir.
you. Good night.